In this lesson, we'll be learning about phylum Nematoda. Nematodes are commonly known as roundworms. Nematos is Greek for thread, and idios is Greek for form of. So nematoda literally means in the form of a thread. And this description fits nematodes perfectly because they look like a little piece of thread. They are round, have a rounded body shape, and that's because of their pseudocoelom, and we'll get to that in a few slides. This is the definition of a nematode. They are round worms that are unsegmented worms that have pseudocoeloms and digestive systems with two openings, a mouth and an anus. So let's look at some pictures. This is a roundworm that is parasitic. Many nematodes are parasitic. This is a fish, and the fish's guts. And then these little curled up things right here are parasitic roundworms. Here's a roundworm that's big enough to be able to see with the naked eye. These ones are microscopically big, microscopically small. This is a roundworm that is parasitic, and it buries into the muscles of its hosts and forms little cysts. This is also a parasitic roundworm. This one is also a parasitic roundworm, and we'll be learning more about it in the next lesson. This is hookworm, another form of parasitic nematode, and we'll learn more about it in the next lesson. So roundworms have a pseudocoelom, which is a false coelom. And what it means to have a false coelom is there is a cavity, a body cavity, so there is openings and holes within the body of the nematode, but the internal organs are not lined with mesoderm like a true coelom. So here's a picture. You can see the rounded body shape, and there is a cavity. All of this blue stuff would be filled with body fluid, but the organs all have a place. If this were a true coelom, these organs would be lined with a thin layer of tissue. But roundworms have a pseudocoelom, so they don't have the lined organs, but they do have a cavity. So now let's talk about the 7 characteristics of survival. First is feeding. Free-living roundworms, that means roundworms that don't depend on other organisms for their survival, are either carnivores, herbivores, or detritivores. Parasitic roundworms feed on the host's blood and body fluids. There is a complete digestive tract, a mouth, and an anus. In the phyla we have talked about before, there's only been one opening to the digestive tract or to the gastrovascular system, and usually that's called a mouth. In nematodes, we now have a mouth and an anus, two openings in the digestive tract, one where food comes in and then the other where food goes out. So here's the mouth and the anus of the roundworm. For respiration and circulation, nematodes accomplish this by diffusion. So this can happen because the body of the worm is so thin. So there is no respiratory system yet, there's no circulatory system yet. So roundworms don't have blood, they don't have a heart, they don't have any blood vessels. They circulate, they transport nutrients, oxygen, and waste just with diffusion. For excretion, some nematodes have specialized cells to help get rid of the waste, and some have pores where waste exits the body. Waste from undigested food exits the anus. So here's the anus where the undigested food exits. Along the body wall may be some excretory pores where waste can leave. In this picture, we see there's an excretory cell where waste would be collected, deposited in a duct, and then exited or put out of the body using the excretory pore. For response, nematodes have a simple nervous system with a neural ganglion ring that surrounds the pharynx. So that's kind of an interesting characteristic of nematodes, is they have a ring, a neural ganglion ring that surrounds the pharynx. They do have nerves that run the length of the body to control movement and transmit sensory information. And they have several types of chemosensors. Chemosensors, that's a general word for sensors that can detect chemicals. So some things that roundworms may detect may be food, moisture, For parasitic nematodes, they have ways of detecting hosts and which hosts they're able to live in. So here's the nerve ring, this small blue thing that surrounds their pharynx. For movement, they have muscles that extend the length of the body. And that's important because that describes a lot of how they move. And I'm going to go back to this picture here. So their muscles run the length of the body. They don't have any muscles that run around or up and down. And so nematodes, in order to move, they kind of have to bunch themselves together and then kind of propel themselves forward. So they have kind of a unique movement. It's not the movement of like an earthworm that can scrunch and then move, scrunch and then move. Nematodes thrash around a lot. And then for reproduction, all reproduction in nematodes is sexual. The males and females are separate, and they have internal fertilization, which means the male deposits sperm inside the female's reproductive tract. So here's the male. He has a copulatory spicule, and that spicule enters the female's vulva and deposits the sperm. And then the sperm travel to the uterus and fertilize the eggs, and then baby roundworms are born. And that's the end of phylum Nematoda.